My name is Stephanie Lane. I am 36 years old, and for the past 9 years I have worked the floor of a boutique on Maple Avenue, folding cashmere sweaters for women who never once asked my name, while building, receipt by receipt, the quiet, independent life I never thought I would actually get to keep. Then one Tuesday evening, scrolling through a secondhand resale app looking for a coffee table, I found a photograph of my own bedroom. The photo was cropped carefully, but not carefully enough. My headboard sat in the corner of the frame, the one with the small chip in the left post that I had never bothered to fix. On the bed, arranged like a display in my own store, lay 3 pieces of jewelry I recognized immediately. A gold bracelet my ex-boyfriend gave me the Christmas before we broke up, a pair of pearl earrings I had bought myself after my first big commission bonus, and my grandmother's engagement ring, the one with the small sapphire beside the diamond, the one I kept in a velvet box in my nightstand drawer and had never, not once, taken out of the house. The listing was titled Estate Jewelry Bundle, Moving Sale, Must Go This Week. The seller's username was goldenhour_Kayla22. I sat on my kitchen stool for a long time, staring at my own bedspread on a stranger's phone screen, before I understood what I was looking at. My niece had photographed my jewelry on my bed, in my house, and put it up for sale to whoever would pay first. I did not scream. I did not call her name up the stairs. I sat very still, the way I had learned to sit still through every uncomfortable moment in my family, and I thought about how, exactly 2 months earlier, I had handed this girl a spare key and told her my home was hers for as long as she needed it. To understand how I ended up staring at my grandmother's ring on a resale app, you have to understand what my family is like, and what kind of daughter, sister, and aunt I have spent my whole life trying to be. I am the middle child. My older sister Renee married young, had Kayla at 22, and spent the next 2 decades being praised for having a real family, while I was quietly filed under still figuring it out, even after I built a stable job, bought my own small house outright with a down payment I saved for 6 years, and never once asked my parents for money. My younger brother Dean lives 3 states away and calls twice a year, so most family obligations, the kind that actually require showing up, land on me and Renee. Renee's marriage to Kayla's father ended when Kayla was 11, and after that, Renee remarried a man named Curtis, a contractor with a booming voice and a habit of correcting people at dinner tables. Kayla grew up in that house, in that new blended family, with 2 younger half-siblings who got most of the attention, and I always sensed, without anyone saying it directly, that Kayla felt like a guest in her own home, the same way I sometimes felt like a guest in my own family. I liked Kayla. I want to be honest about that, because it makes everything that came after so much harder to explain. She was funny in a dry, understated way, the kind of teenager who noticed things adults missed. When she was 15, she spent a whole summer coming to the boutique after school, sitting on the stool behind the register, doing her homework while I worked. And I taught her how to fold a sweater properly, how to spot real cashmere from a blend, how to talk to a difficult customer without losing your temper. She used to call me the fun aunt, which embarrassed me and secretly meant everything to me, because I have no children of my own, and there is a particular ache in being the aunt who loves a child she will never legally belong to. So when Renee called me in July, her voice tight in a way I recognized from childhood, I did not hesitate the way I probably should have. "Steph," she said, "I need to ask you something big, and I need you to actually think about it before you say no." I told her to just ask. Kayla got into State College for the fall semester, the branch campus, the one 20 minutes from your place. The dorms are already full for new admits. It's some enrollment mess, and Curtis and I really can't do the 2-hour daily commute thing with the little one's school schedule. I was thinking, just for the semester, maybe she could stay with you, close to campus. You're only 15 minutes from the buildings. I remember standing in my kitchen, phone against my ear, looking at my quiet little house and feeling something warm and a little bit lonely settle into place. Company. A project, a chance to actually be present for a kid I had always loved from a slight distance. "Of course," I said, "she can have the guest room." Renee exhaled so hard I heard it through the phone. Thank you. Seriously, Steph. Thank you. She's in a good place right now. She's excited about school. This is a fresh start for her. I did not ask what kind of fresh start a 19-year-old needed. I should have. That phrase sat oddly in my memory for weeks afterward. The way a splinter sits under skin you have stopped noticing until it catches on something. Kayla moved in the last week of August with 2 suitcases, a desktop monitor she refused to let me help carry, and a nervous, overly bright energy that I told myself was just first semester excitement. I gave her the guest room, cleared out half my closet space, and made a spare key that first weekend, sliding it across the kitchen counter to her like it was nothing. This is your home too now, I told her, whatever you need. She hugged me longer than I expected. I remember thinking, this is going to be good for both of us. The first month was genuinely good. She went to classes. She came home most evenings and we cooked together, her chopping vegetables while I handled the stove, both of us narrating our days the way roommates do. I introduced her to my manager at the boutique, and she picked up 2 shifts a week folding stock in the back room, which she seemed to enjoy, or at least performed, enjoying convincingly enough that I never questioned it. I noticed small things starting in late September, but I explained each one away individually, the way you do when you desperately do not want to see a pattern forming. The first thing was money, small amounts, missing from the cash envelope I kept in my kitchen drawer for the cleaning service, gone in increments too small to be sure I hadn't simply miscounted. $40 here, $60 there. I told myself I was bad at tracking cash, that I probably spent it and forgot, even though I have never once in my adult life been careless with money. The second thing was her schedule. She started leaving the boutique shifts 15-20 minutes into a break and not fully returning, always with an excuse ready. A professor moved office hours. A study group ran long. My manager mentioned it to me once gently, the way you mention something to a coworker you like but need to flag. I covered for her twice before I even registered that I was covering for her. The third thing was quieter and harder to name. She started closing her bedroom door fully, where before she had left it cracked. She started taking calls out on the back porch, her voice dropping low the second she saw me in the hallway. When I asked lightly who she was always talking to, she said, "Just a guy," in a tone that closed the conversation before it opened. I told myself this was normal 19-year-old behavior, privacy, a relationship she wasn't ready to share yet. I had been 19 once too, secretive about my own life in ways that had nothing to do with anything sinister. I chose, deliberately, to give her the benefit of every doubt because doubting her felt like a betrayal of the promise I had made to Renee, and to myself that I would actually be present for this girl instead of another distracted relative who let her slip through the cracks. It was the fourth thing that finally cracked that decision open, and it happened almost by accident. In early October, I went looking for the little wooden jewelry box that used to sit on my dresser, the one holding a few pieces I wore in rotation. Nothing valuable, mostly costume jewelry and a couple of gifts from old boyfriends. I wanted to wear a specific necklace to a friend's birthday dinner, a thin gold chain with a small charm, and I could not find it anywhere. I searched my whole bedroom twice before I remembered I had lent Kayla a scarf a week earlier and wondered if the necklace had somehow gotten tangled in with it. I knocked on her door. No answer. I could hear her in the shower down the hall, so I let myself in, just to check the scarf. Nothing more. Her desk was cluttered with textbooks and a laptop she had left open, the screen dimmed, but not locked. I was not looking for anything. I want to be honest about that, too. I was looking for a scarf, but my eye caught the corner of a browser tab, a familiar layout, the kind of resale marketplace I sometimes used myself to sell clothes I no longer wanted. I should have looked away. Instead, I clicked the tab, telling myself I would look for 2 seconds and close it. The seller dashboard was open. Username golden hour _Kayla 22. 23 completed sales over the past 6 weeks. I scrolled, my stomach tightening with every item. A gold chain necklace with a small charm, sold 4 days earlier for $18. A pair of designer sunglasses I had reported missing in September and assumed I'd left somewhere. A vintage silk scarf, listed as never worn, that I recognized as one I had worn constantly, and at the very bottom of the sold items list, a listing from that morning, still active, not yet sold, estate jewelry bundle, moving sale, must go this week. I clicked it before I could stop myself. There it was, my bedroom, my headboard, my bracelet, my pearl earrings, and my grandmother's ring laid out on my own bedspread like merchandise. I closed the laptop exactly as I had found it and walked out of her room in a kind of controlled numbness I did not fully trust myself to break out of yet. I went downstairs, sat at the kitchen table, and waited for the sound of the shower to stop. When Kayla came down 20 minutes later, hair wet, in sweatpants, and one of my old boutique t-shirts, she found me sitting perfectly still with my laptop open in front of me. The same listing pulled up on my own screen this time, zoomed in on the ring. She stopped in the doorway. I watched every ounce of color leave her face. "Aunt Steph," she started. "Sit down," I said. She sat. I did not raise my voice. I want to be clear about that, because I know what people expect from a story like this. Shouting, crying, a scene loud enough for neighbors to hear. That is not what happened. I had spent 36 years being the calm one, the one who absorbed other people's chaos without adding to it, and even in that moment, with my grandmother's ring staring back at me from a stranger's shopping cart, some old, deeply grooved part of me stayed composed. "Explain this to me," I said, turning the laptop toward her. She started crying almost immediately, the kind of crying that comes fast and desperate, more performance than explanation, though I did not fully understand that distinction yet. "I can't explain," she said. "Please, just let me explain. It's not what it looks like. It looks like you have been selling my belongings out of my own house for 6 weeks, I said. "Please, correct me if I'm wrong." She was wrong about very little, as it turned out, though it took me the better part of that evening and the following week to understand the full shape of what had actually happened, because Kayla's explanation came out sideways, in pieces, contradicting itself in small ways I had to sit with and untangle later. The story she gave me that first night was this. She had met someone online in the spring, before she ever moved in with me, a man who called himself Julian, who she had never met in person, but had been talking to daily for months. Julian worked in cryptocurrency, or claimed to. Julian had convinced her, slowly, patiently, the way these things always seem to work, that he needed short-term help covering a business emergency, a frozen account, a customs fee on an investment shipment. Always something specific, always something urgent, always something he promised to pay back the moment his funds cleared. She had started small, she said, sending him money from her own savings in June. By August, her savings were gone, and Julian's emergencies had not stopped. When she moved in with me, she said, she told herself she would stop, that this was her fresh start, but Julian had a way of making the next crisis feel like the one that mattered most. And somewhere in September, she had looked around my house and thought, just this once, just small things, things Steph won't even notice are gone. I sat there listening to my niece describe being manipulated by a stranger for months and felt two entirely separate emotions collide inside me at once. A genuine, aching sympathy for a young woman who had clearly been preyed upon by someone cruel and calculating, and a colder, more exacting anger that she had chosen, again and again, deliberately, to solve that problem by taking from me. "Kayla," I said, "when did you plan on telling me any of this?" She looked at her hands. "I don't know. I kept thinking I'd find a way to fix it before you noticed. By selling my grandmother's ring," I said. Her face crumpled. "I was going to buy it back," she said. "I told myself I'd buy it back before you ever knew it was gone. I know how that sounds." "It sounds," I said, "like a plan that only works if I never look in my own jewelry box." I did not sleep that night. I lay in bed running through every small missing thing over the past 2 months, replaying every excuse I had accepted without question, and underneath the hurt, a specific, sharper thought kept surfacing. My sister had sent her here. My sister had asked me, directly, to take this fresh start into my home, and I needed to understand exactly what Renee did and did not know before Kayla ever arrived. I called Renee the next morning before my shift. I need to ask you something, I said, and I need you to actually answer me honestly, not the way we usually do things in this family. Renee's voice went instantly wary. Okay. Did you know Kayla had money problems before she moved in with me? I asked. Did you know about any of this before you sent her to live in my house? There was a pause on the line long enough that I already had my answer before she spoke. Renee, I said again, did you know? I knew something was going on, she finally said. Curtis found weird charges on a card back in June, some crypto app, and Kayla swore it was a one-time mistake, that she'd handled it. I didn't know the details. I swear to you, Steph, I didn't know she was still involved with whoever this is. But you knew there was a problem, I said, and you sent her to live in my house anyway, without telling me. Another pause. I thought a change of scene would help her, Renee said. I thought if she got away from whatever situation she was in back home, she'd reset. I didn't think she'd bring the problem with her. You didn't think, or you didn't want to think, I said, because it was easier to hand her to me than to actually deal with it yourselves. Renee didn't answer that. The silence told me everything I needed to know. The same silence I had absorbed my whole childhood every time something inconvenient needed somewhere else to land, and I understood, with a clarity that almost hurt more than the theft itself, that this was not new behavior from my sister. This was simply the newest version of an old pattern. Whatever was too difficult to handle directly in Renee's house eventually found its way, quietly, to mine. That's not fair, Renee said finally. I didn't know she'd steal from you. Maybe not the specifics, I said. But you knew something was wrong with her, and instead of dealing with it, you sent her somewhere else and called it a fresh start. That's not fair either, Renee. I hung up before the conversation could turn into the kind of circular argument my family specialized in, where the original problem gets buried under everyone's hurt feelings about how the problem was discussed. Over the following week, I did something I had never done in my entire relationship with my family. I stopped absorbing the situation quietly and started documenting it instead. I went through Kayla's resale account with her sitting beside me, both of us at the kitchen table, and made a full list of every item sold, the sale price, and the date. 23 items. Most of it costume jewelry and clothing worth very little individually, sold for a fraction of its value because she needed cash fast, not fair prices. Total money raised across 6 weeks, just under $400, every cent of which, she admitted, had gone directly to Julian. The ring was the only piece still listed, unsold. I had her take the listing down while I watched, then walked upstairs myself and retrieved it, along with the bracelet and earrings, from a buyer who had messaged interest but not yet paid. I felt something in my chest loosen slightly when the ring was back in my own hand, though the relief was smaller than I expected, thinner because the object had never really been the thing I was grieving. I contacted the resale platform and reported the account, providing the listing screenshots and my own proof of ownership for the more distinctive pieces, mainly the ring, which had appraisal paperwork in my file from years earlier for insurance purposes. The platform suspended the account within 2 days and refunded 3 buyers who had purchased items I could clearly identify as mine. I also, on the advice of a coworker whose husband worked in fraud prevention, filed a report about Julian, not against Kayla, but against the account he had used to extract money from her over those months. The investigator I spoke with told me gently that this was an extremely common pattern, a romance scam targeting young people specifically, building trust for months before introducing financial requests, and that Kayla was, in the strictest legal sense, also a victim, even though her response to that victimization had made her, in my kitchen, someone who had genuinely wronged me. Both things were true. I had to keep reminding myself of that because my anger wanted a clean villain, and what I actually had was a scared, manipulated young woman who had made a series of increasingly bad decisions instead of asking for help. The confrontation that actually resolved things did not happen quietly at my kitchen table. It happened 3 weeks later at Renee's house during a birthday dinner for my younger nephew that the whole family attended because I decided, deliberately, that some things needed to be said where the whole pattern could finally be seen clearly, not just by me, in private, the way every inconvenient truth in my family usually got handled. I brought the folder, Every screenshot, every sale, the appraisal document for the ring, printed and organized the way I would present inventory discrepancies at the boutique, because some part of me understood that my family only ever seemed to take a problem seriously when it arrived looking official. I waited until after the cake, when the little ones had scattered to the living room and it was just the adults still at the table, Renee, Curtis, my parents' Dean, on speakerphone from 3 states away because he had, predictably, not made the trip. "I have something I need to say," I told the table, "and I need everyone to actually listen instead of managing how it makes them feel." I laid the folder open. I explained calmly exactly what had happened over the past 2 months. The missing items, the resale account, the ring, Julian, all of it, in the same even tone I had used with Kayla that first night. I watched my mother's hand go to her mouth. I watched Curtis's jaw tighten in a way that told me he had suspected something and said nothing. I watched Renee's face go through several stages of denial before settling into something that finally looked like actual shame. Kayla sat frozen through the whole thing, staring at the tablecloth, and I made a point of saying clearly that I did not consider her a villain in this story, that I understood she had been manipulated by someone cruel, and that I still cared about her deeply. But I also said, just as clearly, that being manipulated by one person did not give her the right to steal from another, and that the two truths existed side by side without canceling each other out. Then I looked at Renee. "I need you to understand something," I said. "I have spent my whole life being the person this family sends its problems to when nobody wants to deal with them directly. I did it as a kid, and apparently I'm still doing it as an adult. You knew something was wrong with Kayla before she ever set foot in my house, and instead of handling it, you handed her to me and called it a favor." Renee's eyes filled. "That's not fair, Steph," she said again. Quieter this time. "It's exactly fair," I said. "And I'm telling you now, in front of everyone, that it's the last time it happens. I love Kayla. I will still help her because she is my niece and she is in real trouble. But I am not the place where this family's problems go to disappear quietly anymore. If something is wrong, it gets said out loud, at the start, not discovered by accident in someone else's bedroom 2 months later." Nobody at that table argued with me. That silence, unlike the one on the phone with Renee weeks earlier, felt different. It felt less like avoidance and more like the room finally absorbing something true. My father, who rarely speaks in family conflicts, reached over and put his hand briefly on my shoulder. "You handled that better than any of us would have," he said quietly, which was the closest thing to an apology I have ever gotten from him for a lifetime of being handed things nobody else wanted to carry. The following months brought consequences that felt, finally, proportional rather than dramatic. Kayla moved out of my house in November, not because I forced her out in anger, but because we both agreed, calmly, that she needed a different kind of support than I could give her, while also protecting my own trust. She moved back in with Renee and Curtis, started seeing a counselor who specialized in financial exploitation and online manipulation, and blocked every account connected to Julian, whose real identity, according to the investigator I had spoken with, was never fully confirmed, one of hundreds of aliases run by people who specialize in exactly this kind of long, patient theft. Kayla paid me back in small increments starting in January, mostly through shifts she picked up at a different retail job, money arriving in careful, deliberate amounts that felt less like punishment and more like an actual attempt at repair. I did not ask for interest. I did not need the ring's dollar value replaced. I needed and eventually received something closer to honesty, delivered slowly in a series of short, awkward phone calls where she talked about her counseling sessions and I mostly listened. Renee and I are still rebuilding something steadier than what we had before, though it looks different now. She calls before, assuming things about my time or my home. I say no more easily than I used to, without the old guilt that used to follow refusal like a shadow. We are, for the first time in our adult lives, actually talking instead of one of us quietly absorbing whatever the other needed absorbed. I still wear my grandmother's ring, though I moved it to a small safe I bought in November, not because I stopped trusting people in general, but because I finally understood that trust and carelessness are not the same thing, and that protecting something precious does not mean loving the people around you any less. Some nights closing up the boutique, folding the same soft sweaters I have folded for 9 years, I think about that photograph of my own bedroom lit up on a stranger's phone screen, and how close I came to never noticing it at all. I think about how easily my family has always assumed I would simply carry whatever landed at my door, quietly, without complaint, because that is the role I had always played. I am still the fun aunt. I am still the sister people call when something needs handling, but I no longer confuse being needed with being used, and I no longer believe that loving someone means absorbing every consequence of their choices without ever asking them, clearly and out loud, to do better. The ring sits in its safe now, waiting for a day I might have a daughter of my own to give it to, or perhaps for Kayla herself, years from now, once trust has been rebuilt slowly enough to mean something again. Either way, it is mine to give on my own terms when I decide the moment is right. That, more than anything I recovered from a stranger's shopping cart, is the thing I actually got back.
Thank you so much for watching. Drop a comment below, hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you in the next one.